Good morning, Ayin Beis, Volume 3. We're close to the top of page 1381. So let's go over what we learned yesterday. We're learning about different levels in Chochma. Primarily, it began with two. Gilui HaChochma, which is where Mishnah, which is the Mishnah. It's a clear and crystal clear revelation from above, which is Chochma. So Chochma law of the written Torah radiates in the Chochma Tata of Mishnah within Malchus. And that's the six Midos within Chochma. The six Midos is Gilui. Like he said at the bottom of page 1380, Midos Hein Bechinas Gilui. Okay. He broke that down in the parentheses. There was in Riyas Ayin Seichel, where you have that clarity like visual, and Yesod, which is the last of the six Midos in Chochma, which is more Hanocha Sichlis, the resonance, but it's already associating with Bina. That's the parentheses. But regardless, both of them is the Gilui of Chochma. Aval Etzema Chochma is how Chochma is in a state of Helem, and there's no Gilui at all. That's the Mav Chochma, where it has the Ayin of Keser Mamish. So now we see another two levels, even though broadly they're one, Hakol Echad. That one is how Chochma has the Ayin of Keser, and Oi, that it's Chochma as it's encompassed in the source of Chochma. And we discussed that. To explain that, the Rebbe Rashab introduced the Pardes, and then explains the Pardes with another Pardes, the Pardes from the Ramak, Ramoshe Cordovero, which we learned yesterday. So what did he say? Pardes, this is Shar Gimel Perik Zayin, that every sphere, Chol Sphere Tivochin, the Gimel Madregas, every sphere is measured, meaning it has three levels, three dimensions. The way Sfiras HaChochma is the Erech Shivya El HaKeser, meaning how it relates to and is commensurate to Keser. There it receives and then it radiates from Keser, which is the level Dakusa V'Ruchniyosa. This is the subtlety and the sublimeness of the state of Chochma. That's one. B'chinas HaBeis u'b'chinas HaTzmusa, the very Chochma itself. And he doesn't mention the third level. The third, as I said, is how Chochma relates to Bina, the lower sphere. The Rebbe Rashab doesn't mention that. With reason not, because remember, here's the discussion, is Chochma Gluya and Etzema Chochma, or the root of Chochma. Now, to explain these two dimensions of Chochma, the Rebbe Rashab said, Venira, that this is what it says in Shar Hei Pedike. That's the part that we learned yesterday inside. That says that in each sphere, Yesh Vov Madregas B'chol Sphere. There's four levels in every sphere. In Keser, and 6 levels. In Keser, 6 levels in Chochma, 6 levels in Bina. And we discussed the 6 in Keser. The 3 highest ones is still Keser, where everything is concealed. You have the sphere within it, but it's completely concealed. The next sphere, you have them where there's a Gilui, like he said, Ha'alef Mitziyusa B'techa Keser. So the first level of Chochma is how it's a Mitzias is within Keser. The second level is Giluya B'techa Keser, how it's revealed within Keser. Hagimel Gili B'mkema Atzmi. And the third level in Chochma is the Gili as it is an entity of its own. So to understand these three, we went and learned inside that indeed these three, the 3 higher ones in Chochma, are the 3 lower ones in Keser. Because the 3 lower levels in Keser are how Keser is beginning to relate to the next sphere. the Chochma, and he explained specifically how it corresponds, the lower three of Keser with the higher three of Chochma. That's what we learned yesterday. Just to sum up what we learned, and then we'll read now the parentheses, and we'll see how the Rebbe Rashab explains it. So I'm just going back to the Pardes for a moment. Just want to get just refresh what he says. Shar Hey Perek Hey. So he said like this, the bottom of the second column there. Okay, so he said there's six. Shegimel b'chinas achreina shel keser hein gimel rishena shel chochma. Keitzad rishena gluya b'keser v'loy gilui mizgala elametziyusa sham harizuhi revis shomer b'keser. Okay. The shniya from chochma is gluya be'etzem b'teicha keser. That's the fifth level in Keser, that it should become revealed. And Shlishi Shal Chochma Shigluya El Mekema Atzmi. And that's the Shlishi of Keser, that the power that it should become an entity of its own. The example that I gave, which to me is the easiest to relate to, is the levels of how the development of a fetus in the mother's womb. So first, you don't see anything, even though it's there. Then becomes revealed. Then it becomes something that you start seeing is going to be a separate entity, but it's still all within its mother until the actual birthing where it becomes a separate entity altogether. It's just a way of understanding. The lower three levels is how the sphere is beginning to develop its relationship with the next sphere. So just like Keser's through the lower three levels, the last 4, 5, and 6 is how it's to relate to Chochma in a more as Chochma is an identity of its own. So the lower three levels of Chochma is how it begins to relate to Bina. But the focus we have here is on the 3 higher levels of Chochma, because that's what he wants to talk about. Ultimately, come to explain the difference between Atzmus HaChochma and Gilui HaChochma. So that's the Pardes. Now let's go back to the parentheses here in Ayin Beis. So he says 6 levels in every sphere, and Chochma, the level, first level, Mitzvus B'Techa Keser, the second is the Gili B'Techa Keser, the third, Gili B'Mekema Ha'atzmi. Giluyah B'Mekema Ha'atzmi. It's still as an entity itself. So V'ayim Masher Kosav HaRamaz, so the Ramaz says, Parsha Emer, the Ikri Shel Atzilus Hu Mamoiches Tima. The primary of Atzilus is from Moiches Tima. Like we said, begins with Moiches Tima. Shu Chochma Da'arich. Chochma Da'arich is Chochma within Keser. We'll see why he's bringing the Ramaz in this context. The Yesh Lemer, and we can say, now that you say Atzilus relates to the Chochma Shebikeser. In other words, Atzilus is not just Chochma outside of Keser. Chochma Shebikeser, which is Chochma Da'arich, Meiches Tima, is the beginning of Atzilus. This is what the Pardes writes. Like we just read, the B'chinas Chochma Klula B'Keser, that the Chochma that's encompassed in Keser, Shezeo B'chinas Hadalad V'Ahei de Keser. Remember, we learned that the higher levels, the first and second level of Chochma is the 4th and 5th level of Keser. So even though it's still in Keser, but since it's already Keser relating to Chochma, according to the Ramaz, that's already Atzilus has begun. The higher levels of Keser are the domain of Keser, not Atzilus yet. But the lower levels of Keser that are identifying with Chochma that's within them, according to the Ramaz, is already the beginning of Atzilus. That's what the Rebbe Rashab is saying. So that's the first 2 levels of Chochma. he doesn't refer to whatever reason the third level here, but in the Pardes, the third level of Chochma is the sixth level of Keser. Now, the reason Pashtus is because the sixth level of Keser, or the first level of Chochma, or the third level of Chochma is already Chochma Gluya, because it's Chochma B'Mekema Atzmi, it's Chochma as an entity of its own. Whereas the first two levels, it's still within Keser, but it's still called Atzilus, according to the Ramaz, because the process of Chochma has begun to emerge. So it's like asking the question, is the fetus a part of the mother, or is it already something of its own? So the answer is, halachically, uber yerech imay, which means as long as the pregnancy is on, the child is within the womb, and it's attached to the umbilical cord and being fed, so halachically, it's still part of the mother. But there's still stages. You can't compare the first trimester to the second trimester, or to the third one, because the child is developing as an independent entity. As a matter of fact, we know today, by month 6, or 7, or 5, I don't know, whatever it is, you could be viable. It's not preferable, but you could have a viable life outside of the mother's womb. So you see from that, there's stages. So according to the Ramaz, he's basically saying Atzilus begins not with the birth of the child as an independent child, but those levels where Chochma is beginning to become an identity, even though it's still within Keser. That's essentially what he's saying in simple English. So Yeshlema, that's it. So Meichus Timo, Chochma da'arich, that's where the beginning. It's because Chochma klul the Keser. Yeah. The first two levels of. So in other words, in Keser, please, let me explain it, and then we'll stop. I just don't want to confuse anything. So just bear with me. Hold on. So within Keser, you already have the 3 lower levels of Keser, which associate with the 3 higher levels of Chochma, is already in Keser, you're beginning to have the aspects of Chochma. That's essentially what he's saying. And what does that mean? V'hainu, b'chinas ha'primius v'atzmis the Chochma k'moishi b'chinas Ayin. Remember before we said that the level of Etzem HaChochma, Mad HaChochma, is the way Chochma, Yesh b'Chochma, b'chinas Ayin the Keser Mamish. That's the level that we're going to learn as the Gemara reaches that level, not Mishnah, because it's higher than Gili. So that's what he's saying now, that this is the Primius V'atzmis the Chochma. It's not conscious wisdom, which is already the lower levels of Chochma that's revealed. This is the inner and the core of Chochma, the way it is in a state of Ayin of Keser. But it's there. Chochma is there. That's why the Gemara, remember, is not Keser. Gemara is Seichel. Through exertion, we're going to reach a level of Etzem HaChochma. Okay. So let me read 2 more lines with the parenthesis. Excuse me. I'm going to read till the end of the parentheses, another 2 lines. We'll stop, and we could discuss it as much as you like. But it's vital. Ubezeh yesh levayed. Here the Rebbe Rashab says, and in this you can explain, so we have already a nira, a yesh lemer, and a yesh levayed. What I learned from that is that this is a chiddush of the Rebbe Rashab, and being that it's volume 3, I would assume, it's only an assumption, that had the Rebbe Rashab gone over it again, he may have developed this even further. But he gave us enough to work with. So he says, and in this you can explain, Mashanimtze bekama duchtin, or bekama drushim, biksovim. That with this we can explain what we find in a number of discourses, in writings. He refers to the writings of Chassidus, the Pashtus. Like he said before, Ksovim, Mitler Rebbe, other Ksovim. The Chochmas Timoch Nichshav B'Klal Chochma. So now he's associated the Ramaz and the Pardes to what it says in other places, that what? That even though Chochmas Timoch is superconscious wisdom, it's not revealed. It's in the superconscious. But it's considered, it's B'Klal Chochma. It's considered in the world of Chochma. Because you could argue that Chochmas Timoch is in the world of Ayin, in the world of Keser. And being that it's superconscious, it's more of a Keser experience. But because it's already called Chochmas Timoch, In Keser itself, it's not the first three levels of Keser, it's the lower three levels. Chochma is developing into an entity. So in a sense, you see here the bridge between the superconscious and the conscious. And it all originates in the level of Ayin. So if you wanted to spell it out in, let's say, in Avodah terms, you'd say like this. The higher levels of Keser is pure Ayin. They don't feel any sense of self. It's completely absorbing the divine. The lower three levels of Chochma, which become the higher three levels, the lower three levels of Keser, which become the higher three levels of Chochma. So you have now an entity called Chochma. It's still, the focus is bittul, that you're focusing on the higher truth that we talked about, but intelligence has begun to emerge. It's still a superconscious intelligence, superconsciousness. Chochma Gluya is going to be a conscious intelligence, where there it's still radiating the truth because Ayin HaSeichel, but it's not quite as it is in the Etzem of Chochma as it is in Keser. So you have here Keser, you have within Keser Chochma, Chochma Stima, or like he says now, which is Nechsha B'cha Chochma, and then you have Chochma Gluya, which is going to be Mishnah, once Chochma becomes a full-blown, still an Akuda, a point, but a separate entity, a separate sphere outside of Keser. I am Mashin is Boil. This is a key. And look and delve in what we learned earlier. This is in volume 1. Ayin Beis Madregesh Chochma Stima. That in Chochma Stima there are two levels. One is that it's concealed, only being that it could be revealed, but right now it's concealed. So it's a superconscious that's close to the surface, to consciousness. And there's a Chochma Stima that's Soshim Be'etzem. It will never be revealed, but it's still called Chochma Stima. And the long discussion how these two levels of Chochma Stima are the ultimate interface between the divine and existence. So why is it relevant here? Because it could be that Rebbe Rashab is hinting to say that in Chochma Stima there are two levels. There's a level that's more relates to Chochma Gluya. That would be like Sheirish Shemoker HaChochma. And then there's a level of Chochma Stima that relates more to Keser, to the Ayin, and that would be the Atzilus of Chochma. But regardless, they're both called Chochma Stima. So, and that I can't say definitively that the Ramaz is talking about the lower level of Chochma Stima, and that the Maimorim are talking about Nechsha B'chal Chochma, the lower level, because you could say Chochma Stima. Both levels are called Chochma Stima. But nevertheless, in Chochma Stima itself, in the superconscious itself, there's a superconscious closer to consciousness, and there's a superconscious that's more distant from consciousness, which again just demonstrates how God, in his brilliance, created literally stepping stones where you can gradually progress and grow step by step. So from conscious, you can go to the first level of superconscious, then to the next deeper level of superconscious, which will then lead you to a total state of Ayin of Keser, which is complete bittul, where there is no super consciousness altogether, where you become absorbed and connected to the etzem. So this is all talking about Chochma. In Chochma, because remember, Chochma is the bridge to existence. If you jump straight from Keser into Bina, or from Keser into Chochma Gluya, you're missing something. You don't have how the consciousness is included in the superconscious, and you want to have that connection. So you can't just jump from beyond superconscious to conscious. You want to have the superconscious, second level of superconscious, conscious, and then from there it'll move into Bina, etc., etc. The bottom line is every step is accounted for, and we have literally a way to go from, you don't have to jump. Every rung of the ladder leads you to the next rung and to the next. So you have a real, what's the word I want to use, formula that allows you to go step by step by step. It needs more elaboration what these steps are, but that's what he says in the parentheses. And now I'll stop. And if anybody wants to ask anything or comment, questions, please.
So the Chochma Stima is not connected. The higher level of Chochma Stima, this belongs to the first three levels of Keser, or this is not clear?
Whether it's the first three levels of Keser or the lower three levels?
Yeah, I'm talking about, he said in Chochma Stimo, there are two levels. I'm talking about the higher level.
Well, I just said you don't have enough information because at the end of the day, both levels of Chochma Stimo are called Chochma. So you could make the argument the fourth level in Keser is already beginning the first level of Chochma Stimo and then the second, or you can say that Chochma Stimo relates to the higher levels of Keser. He doesn't say enough to be able to answer that question. I will just say that it's clearly that some level of Chochma Stimo is associated, the lower level for sure, is associated with, like he said, Yesh with the Chochma, with levels 4 and 5 of Keser. But it's very possible that the higher level of Chochma Stimo is also there. It's hard to say. I don't have a problem with saying both are true. Remember, this is not these are not stationary levels. Chochma Stimo itself has many levels. So when you say that Keser, that Chochma was included in Keser in a complete state of Helam, and then it comes Begili, then Mekemeh Atzmi, what did he say? Yeah, you could say that Chochma Stimo is developing even in the higher levels of Keser. I don't know. That's something that needs to be further discussed.
Also, but you said before about Uber Yerech Imo Yerlachically, there are difference. I think that even in the beginning, forget about 3 months, even in the beginning, it's not allowed to make abortion. So you cannot say that there is an entity already.
I didn't say there isn't. I just said there's stages of how that entity becomes more manifest and more viable. Look, nobody says you can take after conception and take it out of the mother's womb and it will be viable as a separate entity. We know that. That's not the case. The fact of abortion is not because of killing. Abortion is you're also not allowed to cut out an aver from the mother. Even if it's ubri yerechimei, it's a different discussion. I was talking about the levels of how much it's a separate entity. Okay. Any other questions?
When you say Keser, are you talking Arik and Atik, or just one, or just Arik, or it doesn't matter? Because before we mentioned Arik, I thought.
Well, Chochma Stimo is Chochma of Arich. That's what he said, which would indicate anything higher is level of Atik. It could be the first 3 levels in Keser is more connected to Atik. Not necessarily. It's hard to say because it's not spelled out. You could say either way. Let me see something.
Chochma in Atik? Moichos Stimo?
There is Chochma in Atik, but he's not addressing that here. Sometimes the higher level of Chochma Stimo is Chochma of Atik. Just 1 second. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So let's continue. So let's continue. The Gilead Chochma. Continue after the parentheses. Memkeda hu gili shabaya de Tzintzum. So now he's adding that though Chochma has a root, a source, like he said in Keser, Mokra Chochma, it comes through a Tzimtzum. There's a Tzimtzum that takes place, a concealment. Ayin Temotzeh. Chochma comes from Ayin, shenimtzas b'bchinas Yesh mimikedah sheb'chinas Ayin. What does that pasuk indicate? The pasuk simply means, from whence does Chochma come? Where does Chochma come from? Ayin. Where does it come from? But Chassidus interprets it not like a question, but like a statement. Not where does it come from, but it comes from Ayin. Ma'ayin, Temotzeh, is derived, is drawn Chochma. Ayin is the Ayin of Keser. Chochma is Yesh. That's why it's called Ma'ayin. Yesh Ma'ayin. So anything that comes from a state of Ayin to Yesh requires a Tzimtzum. In other words, it's not just a direct flow. It's not like the superconscious is here and you just open up the faucet and it goes into conscious. It goes through a shift which is called a shift from the Ayin state to the Yesh state.
So the three lower ones of Keser that are found in the top ones of Chochma have a different state. They're not the same, but they correspond in a sense, but they're not exactly the same thing.
Yeah, that's what I would think. Yeah, he may spell it out, but that's what I would. In other words, they go through a shift. It's not just like you have the three lower levels in Keser in a closet, and you open up the closet, and there you have the three higher levels of Chochma. It goes through a shift from an Ayin state to a Yesh state. Now remember, the Yesh of Chochma is still a Nakuda. It's actually called Ayin compared to Bina. But compared to Keser, Chochma is already a Yesh because you already have a spark of an idea. A Yud has emerged. Keser is not even a Yud. Here you have a Yud. So the Yud is a leap from the way it stands inside Keser. It sounds like that. That would be, you could technically argue that maybe the Ayin here is the three higher levels of Keser. And the lower ones are not in the state of that. But it doesn't sound like that because when he says the Gili of Chochma from its source, where is its source? Its source is in the superconscious of the three lower levels of Keser. So that comes through Tzimtzum. Yesh and Ayin. Yeah. Let's see how he goes with this. It sounds like that's correct direction here. But I'm going to go very slowly because it's very dense and every line is like precise. Now the Rebbe Rashab adds another parenthesis. Now, this is not a short parenthesis by all means. I think that this parenthesis, where's it go to? There's a parenthesis within the parentheses. Yeah, this is a 10-line parentheses with several parentheses within the parentheses. If you like, I could skip the parentheses and go to the next section, but it's always more complicated when you go into parentheses because it starts going deeper into the topic. Let's just read the parentheses. We'll go slowly. We managed the last one. We'll manage this one. Okay, ready? So now he says like this. What does this word Temotzeh mean? When you say Chochma Ma'ayin Temotzeh, Motzah means a Metzia. A Metzia means when you find something. As a matter of fact, the Gemara says Metzia is like Behes Chadas. You're walking in the street, you suddenly bump into a lost item. That's called a Metzia. You found something. Metzia also means it's an interesting word. So he's going to now say, V'inyan Temotzeh nida, another nida. The Rebbe Rashab is saying, it seems that the word Temotzeh, or the inyan of Temotzeh, nida appears, Shezo b'chinas Yesod Abba. It seems to me, basically, nida, that's the level of Yesod Abba. Let's go back to the bottom of last page. Remember Yesod Abba? That's the sixth of the six Midos within Chochma Gluya. And what was Yesod Abba? I'm reading the third line from the bottom of last page, just to connect it. Is the Nekudas HaSkola Shaba Chochma. It's sichli. It's not Chochma as in experiencing a higher truth. It's Chochma as it's already manifesting in a spark of an idea that becomes the mocker for the comprehension of Bina. So no, it's the lowest level of Chochma. It's Chochma which is already associating to Bina. It's true, it's still Chochma because it's Hanocha Sichlis. There's a resonating truth there, but it's a resonating truth that's already manifest in a Seichel. So the Rebbe Rashab is saying, Temotzeh, Nira, it appears to me, or it seems, that this is the level of Yesod Abba, the Yesod of Chochma, that's like, for example, the spark of an idea. There's already a seed of an idea here that you can actually communicate. You'll say, this morning I had an idea fell into my head. By the way, the word Temotzeh is like fell. It fell your way. That's why it's called Temotzeh. It's not something that you planned. Like I said, Behes Chadash, you bumped into it. An idea fell into your brain. It went into you. So he said, that is Yesod Abba, and that's the Temotzeh. So he said, Chochma Ma'ayin Temotzeh. That Chochma Ma'ayin, it came from Ayin, but it's in a state of Temotzeh. Something was found. What was found? The Nekudas Sichlis. U'kamosh Keser b'mokem achar, like it says elsewhere, Shezeu Gimel Madreges Ma'ayin. Shezeu Gimel Madreges Ma'ayin, Hu HaChochma Kamoshi B'Mkedesh Shebechinas Ayin Kanal. What does he mean by so Gimel Madreges Ma'ayin? Ma'ayin Hu HaChochma? Just a second, let me just think this through. Shezeu Gimel Madreges Ma'ayin. One second. I don't understand initially how to read these lines, to be very honest. Not sure what he's saying here. Whether it's Gimel Madreges and Ayin. So I'm reading the whole parentheses to see what he's trying to say. This is not a simple piece.
Maybe.
First, I thought he meant the Gimel Madreges that the Pardes said, in the top, that Tibochen, that there's a Chochma as it relates to Keser, the Chochma by itself, and Chochma that relates to Bina. Then I thought maybe he means the three levels of the higher levels of Chochma that relate to the three lower levels of Keser. But now when I read it, I'm not sure what he means. One second. I'm happy to get some help here. I just want to finish my own thought process here. Because then he says here, the Chochma Ma'ayin, Moshe b'Mkeira, HaChochma Ma'ayin b'chinas Gili HaChochma, v'adayin ein b'chinas Chochma Pratis, v'Temotzeh k'mo shebein Yisichel Prati. I think the way to read it, this is this is where I think it goes. Period, comma. That this we talk about Temotzeh, that there's three levels. And then he goes and says, Ma'ayin hu ha-chochma kamoshi b'mkeira shebechinas ayin. V'chochma ma'ayin. In other words, chochma ma'ayin Temotzeh has three words. Chochma, ma'ayin, Temotzeh. Temotzeh, he says, is Yesod Abba. Ma'ayin is the chochma, the way it's in its source, which is a state of ayin. So now we still have to account for the word chochma. We have Temotzeh's Yesod Abba. Ma'ayin is the mokra chochma. V'chochma ma'ayin hu b'chinas gili ha-chochma. I think that's the way you read it. The three levels here is v'chochma ma'ayin Temotzeh. So Temotzeh is Yesod Abba. It's already an akud of askola. It's chochma as it's a spark of an idea. Ma'ayin is the source of chochma, the other extreme, the highest level, where chochma is still in its source, which is ayin. V'chochma ma'ayin is the gili of chochma, but it's still not protis. It didn't become Temotzeh. It didn't become Yesod. It's like the higher Midos of chochma. That chochma has not yet become Yesod. Yeah, that's the way it's meant to be read. I understand now. The Gimel Badesh, Zo Gimel Madregas. Ma'ayin, Chochma, and Temotzeh. But let me stop if somebody wants to say things. I think I figured it out. Okay, so then let's read it inside. And
Sounds like the only thing is, it would be helpful to make some commas. We have commas just before that.
Look, I cannot speak for the Rebbe Rashab. Maybe he thought if we struggle enough. Listen, in Tanya, it would also be nice if there were commas, but there are no commas. What could you do? You don't always get what you want. Okay. Yeah, that's the way I would read it. It makes sense. I see now how it works. Okay. So let's go back. So basically, the parenthesis is going to explain that in Chochma, there are three levels, and we'll see whether these correspond to the three levels that we spoke about. He's going to mention it as well. So let's read it slowly. Again, V'inyan Temotzeh nira, that's Yesod Abba, that's already a seichel. Like it says elsewhere, that's Shazel Gimel Madregas. We have three levels here. Ma'ayin hu ha-chochma kamoshi b'mkeira. That's not chochma yet in a revealed way. It's chochma is in its source, like we said before, shebechinas ayin. Essentially the source in Keser. Canal. V'chochma ma'ayin. Now, from this ayin, from the source of chochma, comes chochma, and this is through a Tzintzum, like we said. Hu b'chinas gili ha-chochma. This is the revelation of chochma. However, it's not yet Temotzeh, it's not yet in a state of a seichel. V'adayin eina b'chinas chochma protis. It's revealed, but it's not yet a detailed idea. What does that mean? It means it's no longer in its source. Something has emerged, but you don't have protis yet. And he's going to give an example. Very interesting example. This is like when you talk about intelligence, that's always dwelling in the mind. Your mind always has intelligence, even when you sleep. Even when you're not using your mind, there's seichel she'er b'moach tamid. Gam b'zman she'ein esuk b'muskalos. Even at a time when you're not busy concentrating or thinking about ideas. A person's, the seichel is always there. So that, he says, is not ayin, because the seichel is there. But it's also not a specific seichel. It's just seichel sitting there. It's like the power of intelligence is already revealed. You have it, and you can access it any second. So it's no longer in a state of ayin as a mokar seichel. It's come out of the mokar into a state of yesh, but it's just seichel that resides in your mind. That's one way he explains it. What the second level is. Chochma ma'ayin, the chochma. Gam yeshlemer, another, you could also explain, you could also say the Beis Madregas Anal, that these two levels, ayin, mokar seichel, and seichel, Hu inyan shema etzem v'shema tayar. Okay. So shema etzem, shema tayar. I have to explain what this means. Again, very, very short and dense. Commission is barely ill. Was also explained at length in volume 1, and I think in volume 2 as well. What's the difference? He spoke about different ways you describe something. When you say there's a shema etzem, there's a shema tayar, there's a shema pu'ula, and there's a shema mushal. So when you say, for example,
Breaking up.
shema pu'ula, I'm just being saying, what?
You broke
breaking
up,
up, you said?
You missed the critical sentence.
How's it now?
That was good.
Okay, it's good. So when you say there's a shame, the names of an object. You say, for example, let's say a shema etzem, a table, a shulchan. That's the name of the object. You say a long table, a short table, a table of wood, a table made out of plastic. That's a shema tayar. That's a descriptive name. It's describing the object. It's not just the core name. Like I could call you Ruven. That's a shema etzem. Ruven is a chochem. That's a shema tayar. Shema pu'ula, which is not relevant here, I just want to say it for the record, is the function that Ruven, who's a chochem, is a Rosh Yeshiva, for example. That's what he does. Pu'ula is the function, the tayar is a descriptive, and the etzem, and shema etzem is the very object. So he said, on God, we also have this. For example, when you say Shem Havaya, we call it Shema Etzem. You say Shem Elikim, it's called Shema Tayar. Why? Because God, Havaya describes the essence of the divine before any particular details. Elikim is the Eibishter as he's in Midos Hadin. How God is in a state of judging, a state of discretion. Shem Kael is in Chesed. So there's the Shemus. So he's saying that the difference between when you say, for example, Chochma, so Chochma could be Chochma in its source, is Shema Etzem, the very essence of wisdom. It's one way to explain it. I think there's another way you can explain it. Let's see. Shema Toyar is already, Chochma is describing what kind of wisdom, but you don't yet have details. That's what I think he's saying. Another way you could say that, because I'm wondering what he means by Yesh the Beis Madregas Hanal. So what are the two levels? So far, we've learned the level of Ayin, Makra Chochma, and we've learned the level of Chochma, which is not details yet, that he said. So he's giving an explanation. So first explanation was the Seichel as it's in the mind, even when you're not thinking about ideas. But nevertheless, Seichel is there. The second, the Gam Yesh Lemer, is that we're talking about Shema Etzem and Shema Toyar. However, when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking that maybe Shema Etzem could be Chochma as it is in the mind, it's a Etzem, and then the Proti is the Toyar. No, you can't say that because he didn't yet bring the Seichel Proti. No, the two ways are what I just said. So basically, so far we've discussed Ayin and Chochma Ma'ayin. And now he's going to go back to Temotzeh. Any questions?
What is the adding with the Yesh Loimer, Shema Etzem, and Shema Toyar? What is this adding in a
It's adding a different way of explaining what is the difference between the Seichel as it is in its Mokir, in Ayin, and the Seichel that's already revealed, but not yet Yesod Abba. It's not yet a specific idea. So he's adding another way of explaining it. One way is that it's the seichel and the moyach, even when you're not using when you're not concentrating on any particular ideas. And the second way, it's a shema toyar of seichel, in contrast to shema etzem, which is the moker seichel. Just another explanation.
When it is in your moyach, even kisheina oisek v'muskolis, this is the shem hatoyar.
He didn't say that. He said gam yesh lemer. It could be, or it could be a different explanation. Maybe. That's already bringing both together. The Rebbe Rashab said, Gam Yesh Lemer, so it could be not an explanation of Seichel and the Moyach, it could be an explanation of what's the difference between Ayin and Chochma. You could say that too. I'm not negating it. I'm saying it's not definitive. Okay.
How would you Temotzeh according to this explanation?
Shema Etzem is the Seichel before it's in a state of Ayin, the Mokara Seichel.
Okay, I don't understand clear the difference.
Well, you have to, that's why you need to know the difference between Etzem and Toyar. So that's what I think he's saying. Okay. The Temotzeh, the third level, that's already how Seichel comes in a specific idea. What he called Yesod Abba. The Kudus HaSkola, there's a specific idea here. So he calls this now Shema Pu'ula. That's why I mentioned Shema Pu'ula. This is already the Koyach HaPoyel of Chochma that's already now activated. Not the Seichel in the mind as it is on its own, or the Shema Toyar that describes the Seichel, the type of Seichel, but now it's been activated by Poyel, and that's Shema Pu'ula. This is already an act. What kind of Seichel? What? Not just in general. What's the specific idea? That's the Pu'ula. The Pu'ula Seichel, the idea that we're gonna solve. We're going to make shalom by coming together in an asifa, a specific idea. I just gave an example. That's Shema Pu'ula. So there you have the three levels. But the Rebbe Rashab is not finished. Let's continue the parentheses. Because now the question is, what about the 6 Midos of Chochma? Yesod Abba is the third level, Temotzeh. So he says, nevertheless, you can say another Yesh Lemer. That also the level of the attributes or the measures within Chochma. Remember, we're talking about Chesed, Gvura, Teferes, Netzach, Chayid, who b'chlal Temotzeh. Not just Yesod, but also the 6 Midos is also together and also included in the word Temotzeh. In other words, something has emerged. Because like we said before, the Seichel has come now in a state of Gili in Mishnayos, and that's the level of the 6 Midos. So not just Yesod Abba, but all 6 Midos is the level of Temotzeh. So basically, Ayin is the source of Seichel. Chochma Ma'ayin is the Seichel that has come now revealed, but not details. And he gave 2 explanations for that. Either Seichel that resides in your mind, but you're not focusing on concentrating on ideas, or it's like Shema Toyar. And then there's the Vav Midos, to the end with Yesod, that's already Temotzeh, that's included that the Seichel has come begili in an idea. Obviously, the idea, the concentrated point is Yesod, but also the Vav Midos, he says now, are also included in the Gili HaChochma. So you have the Gili HaChochma and the Vav Midos, you have the Gili HaChochma and Chochma Ma'ayin, but it's not really begili in the full sense of the word because it's not, there's no detail yet. And then there's the Mokra Chochma, which is the Ayin Temotzeh. Remember, there's Atzmus HaChochma, and there's Chochma as it's in Keser, and so on. So the Chochma as it's Mokra is already in Keser, but then there's even deeper. We said before, there's Chochma Etzem HaChochma. I'll sum it all up when we finish it. I don't want to yet sum it up because I haven't seen all the details. Okay, that's the Yesh Lemer that he adds. Another Yesh Lemer. And here's some more information. Another parenthesis, in the parentheses, V'hu ke'inyan beza perushim b'tevas bara. Yeah, this piece for sure, I can tell you without question in my mind, had the Rebbe Rashab went over, we would have from this probably 10 pages. I don't know, 10 pages, but definitely more than just, because every line here is like, when you unpack it, is a whole discussion. So he says now, V'hu ke'inyan beis, there's 2 meanings in the word bara. Reish is bara lakim. What does the word bara mean? So we all teach bara from the word creation. So he says there's two meanings in it. Loshen Bria, Shahu Bechinis Yesh Metzias. Beresh is Bara Lakim, that he created Yesh Ma'ayin. He created a substance from a state where there was no substance. Excuse me. Yeah. What's the second Pirush? Umaloshen Ubara Oisam. Ubara Oisam, it's touched when it says Ubara Oisam is Gilui. Not creation, but revelation. So it sounds to me that the Rebbe Rashab is saying that Chochma Ma'ayin is a form of Bara. And Temotzeh is a form of Gilui. In other words, the Seichel in its Mocker is a state of Ayin. We need to create a Yesh, like he said with the Tzimtzum. Yesh means that the Seichel shouldn't remain in a state of Ayin and superconsciousness or beyond substance. You need substance. So the first step is create substance. Seichel. However, you don't have details yet. And then you have Gilui, revealing from the Seichel the Gilui, which sounds more like the first interpretation, that Seichel in the mind, even when it's not revealed. And then there's the Seichel as it comes into a revealed state. That's what it sounds like he's saying. If you really want to push it, you could say the two Perushim is the difference between the Vav Midos, the 5 Midos, and Yesod. That the 5 Midos is like Bara, creation, but I don't think that's the case because it's Yesh Ma'ayin. And the Yesod is a Gilui Proti. So I would think the parentheses is not going on the last line, is going on the whole topic that he's been discussing till now, the 3 levels. I'm just saying it because when you read it, you could B'deichik, you could say he's referring to the last 2 points of Midas versus Yesod. But I don't think so. I think it's more the way I just described. And finally, the last 2 lines of the parentheses, V'achochma ma'ayin. And this level, Chochma ma'ayin, remember we said Chochma comes from Ayin? Hu b'chinas atzmusa, b'chinas hagimel shebechochma shebepardesham. Remember the 3 levels of Chochma. One is how it's encompassed in Keser. The second is how Gili b'teicha Keser, how it's revealed within Keser. Hagimel Gili b'mekema atzmei, how it's now revealed as in its own location, its own domain. So he's saying the Chochma ma'ayin, not Ayin. Ayin is the second, or probably the second level of Chochma. But Chochma ma'ayin is atzmusa. What he means by atzmusa means very core of Chochma, the 3rd level of Chochma in the pardas that we spoke about before. The Temotzeh hu b'chinas hamidas shebechochma, shu b'chinas hagili. And Temotzeh is referring to the Midas within Chochma, that's already the Gili, not the core Chochma, it's already Gili. And that's the parentheses, the 10-line parentheses that we just learned. I still need to figure out, why is he bringing this Bechinas HaGimel? He just wants to place it properly. So you have Ayin, probably be the 2nd level, Chochma Ma'ayin, and Temotzeh. Is Temotzeh the 4th level in Chochma? Maybe. Doesn't say. He just says it's the Midas Sheba So yeah, basically it's no longer just the core Chochma as a domain of its own, which is the 3rd level. It's now coming in a revealed state on its level, not revealed within Keser.
So the 4th level, as we, it mentioned, it would be applied to Bina and the Midas, going down a level.
I don't know if it's the 4th level. I just was speculating that maybe, but he doesn't say it explicitly. It's definitely going to lead into Bina. So it sounds like it's going downward. It may be the 4th, 5th, and 6th for all I know. Let me see. I'm looking at the Pardes now. Well, he doesn't say it explicitly, so it's hard to know for sure. Okay, I'm going to stop here. Any questions? Anything you want me to clarify? It's a fascinating structure here. It's basically giving us the architecture of the spheres, especially in the context of Chochma, superconscious, conscious. Very interesting. But there isn't a lot, yeah. But it's not finished yet. Just to add a little, I was going to say it tomorrow, but I'll just add. When you say, for example, a person is a ish chesed be'etzem, he's fundamentally wired, fundamentally a kind person. That's called Shema Etzem. Shema Toyar is already describing that his personality is kind, meaning it's already an expression of something. And Pu'ula is the actual Pu'ula when he does kindness. Same thing with Chochma. When you say someone is Be'etzem HaChochem, Shema Chochem Be'etzem, means that he's just a wise, intelligent person. His personality, his essence is wisdom, is a wise, he's essentially a wise person. Toyar is already a descriptive person, saying the Ish HaChochem, describing that he is his expression is wisdom, and the pool of Chochma, Poilus HaChochma, if I recall correctly, is when he's actually teaching, and you see his wisdom active. That's how he explained this, I believe, much earlier. So that's when you say Chochma is Etzem. That's what he says, Shema Etzem, Shema Toyar. And then the Shema Pu'ula, when it actually, you see it actively. So the difference in Toyar and Etzem in that context, one is just Be'etzem. It could be something he's not even acting on at all. Toyar is that you see, you're in the presence of a wise person. There is an expression of it, even though it's not manifest in any specific active way. And Shema Pu'ula is when it's actually active in a specific fashion. I have to go back to volume 1 to really go a little deeper, but I think it's relevant because he may refer to it as we go further down. But I'm going to stop here because the next section is still part of this discussion, but we'll do that tomorrow. Okay. So we're stopping here in the middle of 2/3 of the way down.